In the year 937,
King Aethelstan of the young English kingdom faced the greatest alliance ever to threaten his rule and the unity he had forged.
From the north, King Constantine I marched south with the army of Scotland. From the Irish Sea,
the Viking king Olaf Guthfrithson sailed across the waves and landed on the coast of England. With them came forces from Strathclyde.
The aim of the alliance was clear: to shatter Aethelstan's power and divide England. If they won, the dream of unity would vanish.
Aethelstan did not wait to be attacked. He marched north, determined to stop the alliance before it could push deep into Mercia.
The two great armies met at Brunanburh. The exact location remains disputed, but it was certainly open ground, with low hills and scattered marshland. Early dawn laid a thin mist over the plain. From the south, the English advanced in disciplined formation. At the center stood the heavy Saxon infantry, a dense shield wall with round shields locked into an unbroken wooden barrier. Behind them were reserves and the royal household guard. The wings were extended to prevent encirclement. Aethelstan did not divide his strength. He chose to form a solid mass, a moving wall. He understood that his enemies were made up of different elements. The Vikings excelled in direct assault, while the Scots favored heavy infantry and long spears. If he could hold the center firm, he could cause the alliance to unravel from within. From the north and west, the allied army advanced. Olaf placed his Viking warriors in the front ranks. They carried long war axes, Nordic swords, and painted shields. Their formation was not as tight as the Saxons, but it was more flexible. Behind them and slightly to the left stood Constantine's Scottish troops, their dense ranks of spears and large oval shields ready. The alliance had the advantage in numbers, but it had one problem: 3 forces, 3 commanders, 3 styles of warfare. Olaf wanted a swift assault to break the Saxon line before it could fully consolidate. Constantine was more cautious, keeping his men back to wait for the right moment. Aethelstan secured slightly higher ground. It was not a great hill, but it was enough to offer an advantage in defense. He ordered the shields locked tight. Banners fluttered behind the center. The wind blew from the west, carrying the scent of sea salt and wet mud. The distance between the armies steadily narrowed. There was no prolonged exchange of arrows. This was a battle of shields and steel. Olaf gave the first command. The Viking line roared, advancing quickly before breaking into a run. They did not form a tightly locked shield wall like the Saxons, but left space to swing their axes. Their intent was clear: smash the English center before the Scots even joined the fight. 50 paces. Aethelstan did not order a charge. He waited 20 paces. The first impact struck like thunder. 2 walls collided. Shields splintered. Spears snapped. Men fell. The center of the battlefield trembled. Vikings wielded 2-handed axes, hacking at the edges of Saxon shields to tear open gaps. The Saxons responded by pressing shoulder to shoulder, sealing every breach the moment a man fell. They did not pursue, they held. Olaf realized the first assault would not break them. He sent in a second wave, increasing the pressure. The ground before the line turned slick with blood and mud. While the center was pinned, the allied right wing, the Scots, began advancing slowly, spears leveled. They did not run. They kept a steady pace, aiming to stretch the Saxon left. Aethelstan saw the movement. He shifted part of his reserves to the left, but did not weaken the center. He accepted the strain on the wing to preserve the core. The battlefield was no longer a straight line. It began to curve. On the Saxon left, the Scots collided with the men of Mercia. Their long spears gave them an advantage in the opening minutes, driving the Saxons back step by step. Some ranks began to fall back onto lower ground. Olaf saw the opening. He ordered a full push at the center. The second Viking assault was stronger than the first. They leapt over bodies and forced their way into the smallest gaps. A section of the Saxon shield wall cracked. For a brief moment, a group of Vikings broke through and cut into the rear ranks. For the first time, the English line truly wavered. Aethelstan did not retreat. He committed his royal guard, his finest warriors, directly into the breach. Rather than pushing too far, they struck along the gap to seal it. The opening was closed. The center held, but at heavy cost. The battle had only begun. By midday, the sun stood high and the mist had burned away. Brunanburh was no longer 2 solid masses colliding, but a shattered field of fierce clashes, where clusters of warriors fought hand to hand among mud and corpses. The center remained the fiercest point. After 2 failed assaults, Olaf Guthfrithson changed tactics. He no longer hurled his men forward in great waves. Instead, smaller groups were sent in continuously, like waves breaking against rock. The aim was not immediate rupture, but attrition. The tactic began to work. The Saxon shield wall was no longer as dense as at dawn. Gaps appeared more often, and each time a man fell it took longer to close the space. Those seconds were enough for Viking axes to bite deep. On the English left, the situation worsened quickly. Constantine's Scots maintained their steady advance, using long spears to press forward step by step.
They did not rush wildly but pushed as a single mass. Each step was a shove of shields and a thrust of spears. The ground here dipped slightly. As the Mercians fell back,
they slipped in mud and bodies. The formation began to falter. Constantine recognized the moment and ordered greater speed. The Scottish line shifted from steady march to half-run. Spear points were lowered toward thighs and bellies rather than chests. Saxon shields were lifted, exposing gaps below. A section of the English left collapsed. Cheers rose from the Scots as they pierced the first line. Some Mercian units turned and fled toward the low ridge where English reserves stood. It was a critical moment. If the Scots could wheel into the flank of the Saxon center, the entire shield wall would be struck sideways, and no formation could endure that. At the center, Aethelstan received word that his left was breaking. He did not pull back the entire line. He did the opposite. He ordered the right wing, where the men of Wessex still stood firm, to advance. It was a risky decision. As the right moved forward and the center held, the English line formed an angled spearhead. Olaf saw the shift and believed the Saxons were desperate. He committed his remaining elite warriors with two-handed axes and long swords against the junction between the English center and right. The blow was tremendous. This time the shield wall was not merely shaken, it was torn open. A wide breach appeared, larger than any before. Vikings surged through in chaotic fighting. For several minutes, the English center lost cohesion. Dust, steel, and screams merged into confusion. There was no clear battle line, only clusters of men killing one another. Yet this chaos slowed Olaf's plan. The Vikings were strongest in massed assault, but in dense melee their long axes lost advantage. They lacked space to swing fully. The shorter Saxon swords and daggers proved more adaptable. Aethelstan entered the most dangerous ground with his guard. He did not remain behind. His presence rallied scattered units around the royal banner. Warriors reformed in smaller clusters, shields raised in tight groups rather than long lines. The center was not fully restored, but it did not collapse. Meanwhile, the English right had advanced far enough to strike the overextended Scots in the flank. The counterblow was not vast, but it was timely. The Scots, pressing forward, were struck sideways. They were forced to turn shields and lost momentum. Constantine tried to maintain formation, but the low ground made maneuver difficult. Rear ranks could not see clearly. The formation compressed. The initiative shifted to Aethelstan. He did not unleash a reckless counterattack. He pressed steadily, step by step. Olaf realized the battle had entered its decisive phase. He ordered a final general assault before evening. All remaining allied forces were committed at once. Vikings and Scots pressed together. The armies locked in close struggle. Each advance was measured in half a body length. Then disaster struck on the Scottish wing. Constantine's son, commanding part of the front line, was killed in the fighting. The news spread swiftly. Hesitation appeared, not from grief but from broken command. The spear line faltered. Only for a moment, but in a battle lasting hours, a single moment was enough. Aethelstan saw the gap. He ordered his right wing and nearby center to drive hard left, striking diagonally at the seam between Vikings and Scots. It was the decisive stroke. The gap between the allied forces was only a few dozen paces wide, but in an army stretched to its limits it was fatal. Aethelstan did not hesitate. He drove his disciplined center leftward into the junction. The men of Wessex increased their pace, advancing in tight shield groups. When they reached the gap, they did not pause to fight separately. They punched straight through. The battlefield was split in two. The Scots suddenly found their right exposed. Orders overlapped and were drowned in noise. At the same time, Olaf's Vikings felt pressure from the flank. Committed fully forward, they could not turn shields in unison. Some turned to defend, exposing their backs to the Saxons before them. Within minutes, the allied center lost cohesion entirely. Aethelstan drove deeper but kept his wedge tight. Behind it, Saxon units poured through to sever the two enemy forces completely. The field divided into two separate struggles. On one side, the Scots were driven back into low ground. Mud and bodies ruined their formation. Constantine tried to rally his men, but command was fractured. Local leaders acted independently. Unity vanished. On the other side, Olaf attempted to form a defensive circle, shields outward. It was their traditional defense when overwhelmed, but they were exhausted. The battle had raged from morning into late afternoon. Arms felt heavy as lead. Shields were shattered. Aethelstan did not rush the circle. He encircled it and pressed steadily. Saxon spears thrust in and withdrew again and again. There was no need for reckless charge, only tightening pressure. Meanwhile, the last Scottish line broke entirely. It was no longer ordered withdrawal, but flight across ground thick with bodies. Once the first men turned, panic spread faster than any command. Constantine withdrew with his remaining guard, seeking escape north. Most Scottish troops scattered. Seeing the Scottish collapse, Viking morale faltered. Their shield circle shrank and tore. Some tried to break toward the coast and the waiting fleet. Aethelstan ordered pursuit. This was no longer formation fighting, but a hunt. The Saxons, though wary, maintained structure. They cut down stragglers. The road to the sea became a corridor of blood. Olaf escaped with part of his force, but not all. Many Vikings fell before reaching the ships. As the sun lowered, Brunanburh fell silent but for the wounded and the gathering ravens. The northern alliance was shattered. Aethelstan did not advance further north at once. He halted when he knew the enemy was broken, pursuing too deeply risked disorder. He held the field. Night fell over a plain strewn with dead from both sides. But the balance of power was decided. Brunanburh was not merely a victory. It was the crushing of the last great attempt to break the unity of England. 3 armies had converged in hope of division. They departed in chaos, shattered piece by piece until they were no alliance at all. The battle ended with the setting sun, but its consequences endured for generations.